What's going on, everyone? We are doing episode 2 of the Bass Central Fishing Podcast. Today we have Drew Gill on. Drew and I traveled together as roommates this whole season fishing Toyotas, Invitationals, some Toyota series last year. Just a quick brief on Drew. We both fished college. Drew is still in college and already has $160,000 in earnings from MLF. He's had a giant year, and I think it'd be safe to say that me and him have learned a lot together. We share information and really have learned from each other and with each other this season. So basically, we are going to go through kind of what it's been like fishing our first year on the Invitationals and Drew's amazing season. So what's going on, Drew?
What's up, dude? I'm excited to talk. It's different though because most podcasts you do are with people you kind of know or you sort of know, but not really, and so it's a little bit more like an interview. And this just feels like a phone call that's being recorded. So
yeah,
but
pretty
I'm
much.
glad to
Drew
be
and
here.
I have these hour-long conversations about random fishing topics all the time, and we could probably have
Absolutely.
20. We could probably have 20 podcasts by now with plenty of information.
Absolutely.
So how's school? You just moved into Campbellsville?
So I'm doing it, all online. So I am currently in the comfort of my own home. But
That's nice.
yeah, class started this week. So the first half of this semester is going to be pretty unfortunate. So I got 6 classes this semester, then I'll have 5 next semester to make sure I get my degree, on time. But the first 3 this half are like finance, and I've got a advanced statistics course, and I got an international business course. So it's not fun so far, and I'm only a weekend, so I don't think it's going to get any better. But
That's
as
great.
far
Did
as that
you say
goes,
you
awesome.
have 5 classes in the spring?
Mhm.
That's gonna be tough if we have another schedule like we did this
I
year.
mean, I had 6 in the spring this last year.
Really? I guess you
Yeah.
do the kind of the A block, B block
Yeah,
kind of thing,
yeah.
though.
It's
Right.
3
Yeah.
classes, the first half of the semester, and 2 in the second in the spring.
Yeah. I mean
3 and 3
that's
in
yeah.
the
So
fall.
it's not like you're doing them all at the same time anyway.
No.
That's good.
But with my time management skills, I'm sure I'll end up being on the on the wrong side of it in the spring. So
Hey, that's fine though. I mean, as long as you pass, all you gotta do is graduate.
it's a good thing I don't do as tackle as long as you do, because if I did, I wouldn't pass.
Yeah. Well, I just get no sleep is what that amounts to.
That's a fact. I don't know how you do it. It's
I actually
unbelievable.
sat in this office today for like 3 or 4 hours organizing tackle, and my goal
So
next year is to be more organized so I can be a little bit more speedy with my tackle.
So I don't know how many of you know this, or if he goes into it. He probably doesn't go into it because
No.
it's ultimately it's kind of monotonous. But this man does tackle consistently the day before events for probably an aggregate like 8 to 11 hours in total.
Eight to, I mean, if you count
I'd
up all
say
the time sitting in my boat.
bare minimum 6, bare minimum.
Well,
I mean, you got to
actually,
think.
if you're talking about our day off, I agree
Yes,
because I can sit there in my boat and just know that I don't have to get it done very soon. Because we start in the mornings, do it throughout the afternoon.
but
But
even with
it,
the Toyotas, like at Grand, you were out there the night between day 2 and day 3 until what? At least like 11:45,
yeah,
somewhere around there,
probably,
and it,
yeah.
it, it
It
was
just,
cold.
I mean, times like that though, especially those tournaments. I was in second place,
Oh, I mean,
and
yeah,
it would
that's
really
true.
bother me if I decided, oh, my hooks are good enough. Oh, my line,
Yeah,
it'll be fine.
and with a
I can
jerk
do it.
bait, that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. You got everything's, yeah, 2 small hooks, 2 light line.
When you're too good to throw an Alabama rig.
Yeah, pretty much. More like it moves too fast in 5 foot of water.
Oh man, that was so masterful though, because I I fished for fish all day long for 3 days straight and only caught a limit out one day out of that whole tournament. And you had the bites have a limit every single day, which would have put you one of 3 in that event.
Yeah, well, just barely. I think I got 18 bites in 3 days. So just enough that I could have had a limit every
That's
day.
brutal.
A little bit of fallout though. So let's go ahead and start with, first of all, like how we got to the Invitationals, because I just graduated last year, and luckily the Toyota season didn't interfere with college schedule, so I was able to fish it. And Drew, you were the same way. And so we both got to fish the Invitationals last year. Both made the championship, both made a top 10 in the championship. And we get invited, although they had to extend extra invites beyond what is normally. We both got invited. And I think we can both say that we were both excited and confident that we could compete because of how much we've learned in college fishing. Even
absolutely.
Even in 2.5 years or what yours was at that point. I mean, the amount of free fishing that we get to do through college is pretty insane, really.
Unbelievable. It's truly extraordinary. I mean, it's the biggest factor in why anglers are getting so good so fast anymore. You know, there's guys like Marshall Robinson and Trey McKinney that are the anomalies, but you know, so many of the guys that you see pumping out into the Toyotas and Invitationals and the Opens, and I mean, so many of the anglers that we see that are showing up and having instant success is because they've been enriching for 2, 3, 4 years in college fishing before making that jump. And I mean, when you get to fish 10, 12, 15 events a year on someone else's dollar and you get to fail on their money that many times, eventually if you're meant to do this, your edge is going to get pretty honed in 3 or 4 years, and you're going to come out of it with, you know, the experience that people used to have to struggle and pinch pennies to pay for. Now you're coming out with a degree, you know, which is an expensive side effect, but you're coming out with a degree and a ton of experience in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I think that any making it to the professional level, semi-pro level, whatever, you know, it takes to get to that next level of fishing it always amounts to experience. So for a lot of people, it's fishing the co-angler side. For a lot of really good anglers now, it's fishing college. And I think that college is the easiest way to have the confidence and figure it out money wise to be able to fish at the next level. Because, for example, Campbellsville and Drury that I fished at, they pay for our expenses. We don't have to pay anything. I mean, you got to pay for school, and like you said, it's pretty expensive. Or at other schools that are kind of a club team or in by themselves, they have fundraisers that helps them pay for it. But if you're fishing, you know, these $1,700 tournaments without the experience, and you go for one season and you lose all that money, you know, for example, it's really hard to keep doing it. It's really hard to like keep gaining experience when you really need it. So I think that really amounts to experience, especially like for me. But you can tell that from a lot of college anglers, because I mean, the college anglers right now all across the country, a lot of them own local areas. And lots of guys.
Briar Chambers and Brody Robinson winning everything around the house at Gunnersville.
Right.
Britt
and typically
Jr. and Tyler
for
Campbell
me,
owning the Herring Lakes. I mean,
and when you think about like local sticks, for example, on the Tennessee River, because Briar wins, I don't know how many tournaments a year, a lot.
Every tournament that happens that he's at.
Every tournament, yeah. I think of like guys that are seasoned, you know, they're probably in their 40s or 50s, and they know every little sneak hole out there on the Tennessee River. But that's not the case. I mean, these guys are just good at finding bass.
100%. I mean, it's college fishing is such a wonderful attribute if you're already planning on going to college, to learn really rapidly, because you're dealing with the expenses. You know, you're dipping your toe in it because as a boater, you're dealing with the expenses of the boat, you know, all the equipment, a lot of times vehicle expenses, which Campbellsville haven't had to worry about. But you know, you're dipping your toe in the expense category, but you're not going full in. You know, you're not paying an exorbitant entry fee. You're not paying gas. You're not paying hotels, and you're not paying food, which is the most massive portion of the expenses for this journey. And so, you know, and the other thing that is, you know, a detriment in college fishing, but also is something that you really got to look at as one of the biggest side effects as to why college anglers are so good, is the fact that the payouts aren't big. And here's the thing, is like we see that and we complain, we're like, oh man, the payouts suck. Every tournament except for the MLF National Championship, the payouts suck. And we look at that and we're like, man, it sucks that we're not fishing for a big payout. But here's the thing, when you get into the Toyotas, you get into the Invitationals, and you get into big payout margins, so we're talking 25% of the field, 33% of the field, people start laying up a lot more often. You know, they do a lot of strategic decisions to catch just enough. And so that leads to sometimes the lack of learning, because you're going and you are falling on your sword to make sure you secure the money you need to keep it going. And in college, that doesn't happen because you get a lot of guys that have one thing on the line, and it's pride. That's it. And all these guys are fishing just to look cool in every event. And what looks cooler than going out either swinging and catching a big bag or hearing the same sob story we hear in the captions and that I used whenever I fell on my face at St. Lawrence a couple weeks ago, which is I went down swinging. Everyone in college fishing is swinging. And it's why we see stupid stuff like what the Messers did at the Harris Chain in 2022 happen, where they catch 36 pounds because everyone's doing so much insane stuff that they get really dialed on what their deal is very well because they're allowed to go out and fail consistently and still get to do it. Name another part of fishing where you can fail consistently and you still get to do it. There's not another branch of fishing on a national level where you can fail consistently and continue to do what you do.
Yeah, 100%. And like I like the example that you used at Harris Chain last year because there was a MLF 1-day tournament, and then 2 weeks later was the Bassmaster 2-day tournament, both in February, I believe. And there was a lot of these guys that fished that MLF tournament and just stayed down there, or they practiced for a week or a week and a half total. And so a lot of these guys, like the guys that got first and second, they both found these giant schools of fish and caught mega bags because they just graphed around and didn't stop until they found them. And there's nothing that beats time on the water, for one. And so you have massive fields that we have already. And gosh, you just put it with these. Yeah. And then you put it with like you said, it's just like a strictly pride deal. Like everyone wants to beat everyone else. It's pretty cutthroat. Everyone will steal your spots.
Vultures. It's crowd control.
Yeah, if you catch a big fish and someone is around you, guarantee they will be there the next day because all 100%. They want to do is catch the biggest fish that they can. They don't care if you like them or they like you. No, it doesn't matter, which, is unfortunate because there is like a Bassmaster the past couple of years. It's 250 boat fields, and that often fills up a lake really fast.
The worst example I saw of it on last year's schedule was at Norfolk. Oh, my goodness. That place was a pain. Because we had 260 boats on a place that's really the navigable portion of Norfolk that everybody was fishing, like 27, 28 miles long total.
Yeah, not huge.
No, and not big enough for that. So for, a fishery, obviously this is relative, places like St. Clair or whatever that are really, have a ton of surface area that's fishable is different, these big grass fisheries like the Kissimmee Chain. But really, for managing a field size-wise, you got to have, max for a comfortable size of fishery and length to the field ratio. Really, you got to have about 5 boats per mile of the fishery is about as much as you can have for a place to feel comfortable. And that's anything past that starts stretching the limits of what's comfortable and what's not. And there's a few places that break that rule, St. Clair does, Kissimmee Chain, Harris Chain can, depending on the grass growth. And some of the herring lakes, Hartwell, Clarks Hill. Clarks Hill was one this year that really was surprising, but places that spread out boats really well.
Right, which, speaking of places that spread out boats a lot, our schedule on the Invitationals this year, I don't know how much we averaged per tournament, but every single place we went was a massive fishery.
It was.
And it was a lot to break down, but it also spread out the field. But what's crazy is oftentimes, a lot of the guys in the top 10 are fishing the same area or the same creek.
Saw that lacrosse.
Yeah, exactly. Same pool, whatever it is, like that happens. But let's go straight into the Invitationals year. So we start off at Okeechobee, and I finished in the 72nd. You finished 65th. Clarks Hill, 110th. This is the most down that I have ever seen Drew in my life. He was pretty upset after this tournament.
I'd say that the pinnacle of it had to be after 2 days of practice at Eufaula. After the second day of practice at Eufaula, my level of love for bass fishing was at an all-time low. I mean, it was just such a snowball.
So let's see. In practice at Clarks Hill, day 3, So Drew and I were like trying to figure out, it's February, it's a herring lake, like we're gonna find suspended fish. And we both practiced the crap out of it. And we both caught fish, but it wasn't anything phenomenal.
Small
And it
one.
was like
A lot of
okay, we're
spots.
a lot of spots, a lot of like 2-pounders, but it wasn't even like a lot of fish like you would
No,
want to see.
it's like a moderate amount of fish. Not like, because sometimes you get such a quantity of fish that you feel like you can pick through them and eventually you're going to catch a good bag because that's how many fish you're catching. But it was just enough to feel like I could catch like 10 or 11 pounds a day fishing for suspended fish. And that wasn't even close to cutting it.
Right. Yeah. They caught too much weight in that event. And so day 3, we like transitioned to the shallow fishing and both found like a lot of fish in the very backs of pockets and creeks. And I got a lot of my bites on a buzz bait. I know you caught a big one on a mag draft, and it was like, okay, like this is pretty good. There's a decent amount of fish. We saw some big ones. And then going into the tournament, what was your mindset of we're fishing shallow this tournament, and how did that turn out?
So my last day of practice at Clarks Hill, had the bites, boated a 4.5, caught a 6 on a mag draft, caught a 3 and change on a poplar.
I
And
forgot
then,
that fish was that big.
yeah, it was, and I saw it
6-pounder.
bite it. Like
Yeah.
it was in 8 inches of water, and I throw my mag
Right.
draft up over the stick and reel it, and I see a flash. I'm like, oh, I got one. And then it jumps, and I was flabbergasted. But I found 4 or 5 areas, like, back sections of either major creeks or a couple little rivers on the lake that had, you'd pull in, you'd fish down a stretch for like, 4 or 5 minutes, and you'd throw your buzz bait over a lay down. And at one point, I took the hook off it, and they jump all over it, and you'd go awesome. You'd drop a dot. And I found 4 or 5 of these areas where I pulled in and got a bite like that. And so I was going into the tournament going, one of these places I'm going to pull up and it's going to pan out. I'm going to catch 2 or 3, 3, 4, 5 pounders in a hurry. And then whatever else I have on top of that, it's not going to really matter, because I was catching them on a mag draft and a black buzz bait, 50 something degree water. And like, it was, ideal scenario for catching big pre-spawn fish around like shallow wood cover. The water was up, it was off colored. And,
It was
there
a
was
warm week.
very warm week. It was 70s in February.
Oh, it was
High
beautiful. Yeah.
70s.
So they should have been
Hot.
on their way. They should have been like replenishing every day, basically, for fish waves moving up.
Yeah, and really felt like with the weather staying hot and the water staying up, staying dirty, that I was going to be able to catch a big bag, and that just never formulated. I caught 10 pounds a day in that tournament. And the first day, I caught 11 pounds. My biggest fish was a spotted bass on a shad wrap on a bridge, and I caught 4 of my 5 fish on a buzz bait, and still only had 11 pounds in February. Tell me, if you're catching them on top water in February, when are you ever going to catch less than like 15 pounds if you get 5 bites? Never happens. Definitely doesn't happen in practice. But in that event, it sure happened. And the wheels just fell off. Thought I could maybe go and scrounge out 14 or 15 pounds second day on bridges. That definitely didn't happen. It was a train wreck of all train wrecks.
I believe it was the opposite on day 2 because it was warm. Let's see. Travis Harriman caught a big bag on a bridge on day 1, and you actually got to see one of those fish
Watch him catch a 5-pounder, heckin' Travis,
as he's idling under the bridge. And then I was talking to him about it, and he said on day 2 he actually didn't even catch him on the bridge. He caught him further back in that creek. So it's like that school had moved from the bridge, like they were going back to spawn. So, but how are you supposed to know that after you struggle on day 1? How are you supposed to keep up with fish that you're not on?
And so that creek me and Travis were in on day 1, he fished the bridge on day 1, and I was gonna fish on the way in, but he was there, so I just idled to the back. I caught a 4 on a buzz bait in the back of this creek in practice. And I was like, it's full of willow trees, full of bushes. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to pick it apart and I'm going to catch a couple big ones. Went back there, had 1 bite, and it was like I reeled my chatterbait past the willow bush, and it just squeaked sideways, and I pull, and there's just nothing there. One of those bites where it's a big one, and there's just absolutely nothing you can do about it. And there is, if I threw a chatterbait more, I would have hooked that fish and landed it. I don't throw a chatterbait very much, and so I was like, when it started going sideways, I was like, the blade's not turning, like an idiot, and then I just and came off, and so day 2, I was like, I'm not going back there, and I got up there and got to fish the bridge, and then lost a giant one. And the wheels just fell apart. I mean, I was face down on the front deck by 9 a.m. and never really looked up from there for the rest of the day. It was pretty
So
brutal.
after this tournament, and you were down, we had some conversations about shallow
89th in the
fishing.
points.
We had some conversations about shallow fishing. So at that point, because this definitely leads on to the rest of the season, what was your thought on being able to catch shallow fish, especially this time of year when they're up around cover?
Yeah, like my thought was like, you know what? I just need to dirty fisheries and stuff like this. I just need to learn how to do it. I was like, I really need to just take a deep dive into shallow fishing and my innermost thoughts about shallow fishing. And then we rolled into Eufaula.
Wait a second. Something at Clark's Hill you were saying was, I can't think like that. I can't do it. I can't just mindlessly shallow fish. And I think that was like the hardest hump mentally that you were trying to get over, is I can't just mentally go around and throw it what I don't know if there's fish on or not.
Yeah, because
which I agree, because everybody is like that now. Like everyone's not going to be necessarily just lost without live scope, but you're gonna be staring down at your foot all day, because like
100%.
It's a habit to see something, whether it's a little piece of cover or just the depth you're in.
And the thing about it is, our sport is not the same sport it was 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And it's not necessarily, the cut and dry answer is, oh, live scope's changed it. And it has, but necessity is the mother of invention. There's a reason we have live scope. It's because our fisheries keep getting more difficult, and we have to invent something to overcome that. Because the issue is if you take forward-facing sonar away, you totally change the aspect of all of these major tournaments all year, and you drop the average weights at every event. I would bet the average weight drop across the board at every event all season would drop by probably 3 to 3.5 pounds across the board in every event all year if you took away forward-facing sonar. Because the thing about it is, it used to be easier to catch them just going down the bank and fishing at what you see, or trying to improvise, because you used to be able to improvise and, I want to go fish this laydown. And you were the first one to fish that laydown that day. And now we have fields of, back in the day, there were fields of 50, 60 boats, and the locals were out there in canoes and paddle boats throwing cane poles because they were out there trying to catch something to eat. Or they were fishing with very primitive bass fishing technology that, isn't even something I would put technology to now. And now, anytime you're trying to fish the bank, you're competing with 150 to 200 tournament boats, as well as all the locals who, as far as fishing the bank goes, are just as skilled and just as prepared equipment-wise as you are. And fishing the bank is something, it's why the guys that can do it well are such an anomaly. And it's why that I really feel like the guys that do it well can't have a say in this sort of argument, because there's something mystical about what they do that is so specific to them because of the way that our sport has changed. They see it as being such a simple, tangible thing, but ultimately, for you to consistently do well on the bank, short of a miracle, you have to be able to understand them in a way that very few other people do, because the bank is way harder than it used to be. You used to be able to fish the bank and catch them.
You always hear guys, which this is true, that it's easier to find shallow fish, but it's harder to catch them. It's harder to find deep fish, but it's easier to catch the deeper fish, which I agree, because there's a lot of factors about presenting your bait, not scaring them away, in fish that are in 2 foot of water. And there's, I think, 2 things that I notice in common about really good shallow anglers. And it's that, well, I'm taking into consideration the guys that are on the top tours, is that all of them throw a spinning rod a lot more than everyone thinks they do. And they're all very, very observant fishermen, to where they know if the birds are chirping around them, they see any little swirl in the water. I hear so many of those guys say, oh, I just like saw this little fin underneath the bush, and I threw up there and worked a fish on a bed that I didn't even see and caught like 6 pounder. I mean, that happened a guy at Dardanelle. I mean, he had like 23 pounds or something, and it was all fish that dirt water, it's just barely see the fin hanging out of the water. And I think that that's actually similar to how you and I fish. And cope with our competitive fields out deep. It's that
Yeah.
looking for those little pieces of cover or noticing like the subtle differences.
Yeah.
And
100%.
I think that makes a huge deal. Like, for example, for me on Kentucky Lake, like if you see a laydown on the bottom on live scope, it doesn't stick up hardly at all. You just see like a
No.
shadow on the
I
bottom.
mean, if you think about it, a big laydown is going to be that big around, right? And in your mind, that you're like, wow, that's a big log. But on live scope, you tilt it this way. You know how tall that is off the bottom? 15, 16 inches. And I
Well,
mean,
and the
that's a
thing is,
big log. And 15, 16 inches off the bottom on live scope, rarely, it doesn't look like a whole lot.
no, and especially because that last like especially like 10, 12, 15 inches kind of blurs into the bottom. And it's different based
Yeah,
on what kind of
it
bottom
bleeds.
composition you have. But yeah, it kind of like fuzzes into the bottom. And so like at Kentucky Lake, I think I weighed in 3 or 4 of my keepers in the tournament off those logs that you can barely see. But
Mm-hmm.
most people are going around looking for giant brush piles or they're looking for like obvious things. And
A
when
main
in
lake point.
reality, yeah, a main lake point, and they're looking for a school of like 50 fish. When in
Yeah.
reality, you're looking for like 1 to 3 fish most of the time. Like the
Yep.
best pieces of cover that I always find are rarely bigger than 5 feet. It's in
And
stumps
there'll be
are
a couple big
typically
dots on
always
it.
the best. Yeah, exactly.
We don't talk
So
about stumps. We don't talk about it.
I
Don't
didn't
fish
say
stumps.
anything.
Don't fish big concrete blocks either.
No, it
Don't do
doesn't
it.
resemble a stump or toilets. You don't
No.
want to. You don't want to fish those either.
Oh my gosh. At
So
Truman, there's a cemetery, isn't there? Somewhere out in the lake.
I'm sure there is probably 80 feet deep.
They live 80
There's
feet deep at Truman.
There's one 80 feet deep at Table Rock. It might be 100.
Wow,
It's pretty deep.
that's silly.
So something interesting that we were just talking about before we hopped on here is MLF posted a podcast clip of them talking to Keith Carson about tours banning live scope, just like they did with the A-Rig. And one comment that he made was that if one tour was to take away live scope, then he thought that they would be the most watched tour by far because it's more fun to watch guys that aren't looking down at their screen. Now, I do agree that it's fun to watch, guys flip into a bush and the whole bush
Absolutely.
shakes and they pull a fish out or a fish eat a frog.
Yeah.
But there's so many tournaments that they don't do that. That guys are still fishing offshore. Offshore fishing is not a new thing. It's just how effectively we can now do it.
And a comment I saw in that post was it said smallmouth fishing has become so monotonous that I can't hardly watch it. Now here's the thing. What has changed from a viewer's perspective about smallmouth fishing in the last 10 years?
Absolutely
Now,
nothing.
I invite you to say something because nothing has changed. And that's the biggest issue with this debate is guys are they're grasping at straws to try and get this sort of technology to go away when the issue is that ultimately the bank fishermen aren't making the argument that the bank is awesome or the bank is super good. They're making the argument that they want to fish the bank. They want to compete on the bank. And they know that, with the amount of pressure that we have and with how much the bank sucks now, the bank doesn't play anymore for a reason. It's not because guys suck at fishing the bank. It's because the bank sucks. If the bank didn't suck, people would be fishing the bank, but they don't. And so like the biggest issue is people would rather be miserable and would rather catch less fish doing it the way that they've always done it than adapt and do it a new way to enjoy it, have fun, and catch big bags. Because the thing is, if you take it away, the weights across the board would absolutely catastrophically plummet. Because our fisheries aren't the same fisheries we had 15 years ago when Kevin was doing it with side scan. Because that's the argument they use. Oh, well, Kevin did it with side scan. Kevin did it with down scan. Our fisheries were different back then. They
No, he
weren't
was
beat
he was
down.
he was one of 2 people anywhere that was doing that. And so the fish that
Yes.
he was finding had not been fished for. They had not seen a big crankbait just ripped through them consistently like he did with those fish. Yeah,
And
that's why
ultimately,
that was his most dominant period too.
yeah. And ultimately, And I can see the perspective. I understand Keith's perspective and some of the viewers' perspective. It's fun to watch somebody go throw a frog over a mat like lacrosse and watching the hole open up in the duckweed and watching them whack one. But ultimately, we've got to accept that that's not the world we live in anymore. What we're going to be watching is we're going to be watching guys do that. And instead of, lacrosse is here for our tournament, for example. Instead of 16 and change winning, we're going to go to watching 13 and 3/4, 14 a day win. And somebody's going to be, throwing a frog to catch 7 or 8 fish a day, where we could have been doing what they were doing and throwing, finesse techniques and catching 25, 30 fish and being able to catch 15, 16 pounds consistently at lacrosse with only 2 hours to fish. That's never been done. I mean, that place is one where it's about fishing time. It's about making casts. It's about getting as many opportunities to put a high 2-3 pounder in the boat as possible. And now with what we're understanding about this technology, we're able to tap into bites that we've never been able to tap into before and enjoy what we're doing. Dustin Connell made a comment on that post that I had to reply to, because Dustin said 20% of the fish on any given fishery live on the bank at a given time, and 80% we've been able to tap into due to technology. And why would we want to go back to beating the bank? It allows us to enjoy what we're doing, because ultimately it was created for a purpose, to put more bass in the boat and to allow us to understand what we're doing. And, it's been a big part of why I've been able to catch up to a lot of people that have come from bass fishing meccas. Coming from Illinois and only getting into this as a junior in high school, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have the ability to use a technology that allows me to put the time in and understand bass behavior. Without that
100%.
technology,
Yeah.
I would be miles behind everyone else. And it allows people like me to catch up. And that's the problem, is we have so many people that have so much experience putting forward the idea that, forward-facing technology is bad or it's unnecessary, because ultimately they know that it's the biggest way that people that are coming from behind, or young people, can catch up with the amount of knowledge and the wealth of knowledge that they have through experience by just putting the time in and learning how bass act.
Right. And I think this is what we're just talking about, is the strongest argument against what he said about most people watching the tour with no live scope. And Keith Carson, wonderful dude, and he's
Awesome
actually
guy.
good. He's actually good at live scoping when they go up north for smallmouth tournaments. Dude catches them still.
Mm-hmm.
But
he's a great fisherman all around.
The thing is like, if you go to any website, let's take YouTube for example. If you go to the most watched fishing videos that there is, they're all informational videos. How do I learn how to do this? What is this guy throwing to catch these fish? What kind of equipment is going to make me better? And that's why you have so many guys that watch professional fishermen. It's not only for the enjoyment of seeing them set the hook, right? It's because they want to learn something.
Trying to learn.
And so what does live scope do? It helps you learn where the fish are, how to catch them, how they react to baits, what percentage of the time you can actually get those fish to bite. Like, dude, I throw a drop shot and a finesse worm more than ever in a little Demiki rig, because it gets those fish to bite the highest percentage of the time, no matter the size of the fish, right? So you don't have to go throw a big bait to catch big fish now. And one thing that I think that will help a tour dominate is if every live camera that they put on MLF or the Elite Series or the MPFO could even do this, but it would be to have side-by-sides of their forward-facing sonar screens so that you can watch what they're watching. You can see those fish chasing their baits. You can see what they're throwing at, because I agree, like if you're watching a smallmouth tournament, you have no idea what they're doing. They could be fishing a little rock pile. They could be in 100 foot of water chasing schooling fish. You don't know. You're just looking at the bank that's 10 miles away. And what makes it fun, for example, Bassmaster posted a couple videos of Cody Huff's screen, because he has Garmin's all around. So you could see his live scope screen on the back of the boat, and the cameraman would be on that. And there were several clips of 20, 30, 40, 50 bass in a school. And he was catching...
If you're a bass fisherman that loves catching big fish, there is absolutely no way that you can twist that to say that's not cool.
No, dude, that gets me so excited.
dude,
That
it's
gets me
awesome.
so excited just to watch that. And people don't know that about Champlain. Like you say, oh, I was chasing schools of bait around and catching these fish, but they don't know that means that you were in a school of 40 bass and you just caught a 4.5 pounder out of it. I mean, that's insane for a lot of people to see that, especially guys that don't have live scope or just, don't get to fish up north. Like, it's a different animal, but it's insane to watch that. And what does that teach you about bass behavior? That's a flat bottom for miles.
So cool.
And I would say a huge thing that I've learned about any lake in the country is how many fish lives suspended all but a week or two out of the year. Like those smallmouth, they never see the bottom. They don't care where the bottom is. They're looking up, and they only look up. They're chasing that bait around.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that so many of these people are like, I wouldn't I hate watching the back of some dude's head while he stares at a TV screen while he's fishing. But here's the goal. Put as many big ones in the boat as possible in the shortest amount of time as possible. And guess what? All of these people that are saying, I hate watching this, or I can't stomach watching this all day. Guess what they're going to be doing when we as tournament anglers handicap ourselves by not using this technology? All of these locals that are fishing around us will still be using it, and they will be murdering these what we call ourselves professionals, because we've chosen to handicap ourselves in the use of technology. And now we're making ourselves miserable while everyone around us gets to have fun, just for the sake of watching someone catch 12 pounds, but instead of looking like this, they're looking like this. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
The angle of their head. That is
a lot
most
of it.
Of what changes 90% of the time.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only thing. And a lot of those guys are hypocritical that are commenting crappy things about it. I mean, it's ridiculous. But
and the money argument is really hypocritical too, because if you want to go into high level bass fishing, $2,500 is not going to break you.
No,
I'm sorry to tell you, but
everybody's like argument is all, I'm gonna have to spend 80 or 100 grand to compete against these guys.
I'm gonna have to sell a kidney or a child,
dude. All but, let's say, 3 or 4% of that money has changed. Less than 5%. Dude, $2,500 compared to $80,000 doesn't compare one bit. You can go buy a $30,000 boat and spend less than half the money and put live scope on it and fully compete the same way that these guys are saying.
100%.
You don't have to have a brand new boat like these professional anglers have. They're just doing it because they can. If they didn't get free boats, they wouldn't have all new boats,
Yeah, 100%.
So it is, that's one of the worst arguments that I hear for sure.
It's people being reluctant to change, but still want to stay competitive. That would be like if somebody wanted to compete in Major League Baseball as a right-handed pitcher, but they say, no, I want to throw in the 80s. Let's handicap the speed that people can throw to 85 miles per hour, because ultimately I'm not willing to do what's necessary to gain that extra velocity, because I don't enjoy the work. I don't enjoy putting in the time, but I still want to compete throwing a top end of 85. That's not how it works. If you want to compete, you have to do what's necessary to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that if you go and buy live scope, I mean, it's not very much to win $2,500 throughout the entirety of a year. Between making checks, you might win a tournament or two in the whole year that pays for it. And now you're breaking even. And say you didn't have live scope and you didn't make any money, you're still at the same point by breaking even with whatever it is. So I think that's how I justify like electronics or buying the massive amount of baits and tackle that we do to compete on the highest level. You have to do that kind of stuff to keep up. But if it helps you make an extra $500 and you spent $500 to do it, that's totally worth it.
Yeah. And it's just ironic, because it would be as if doing a bat flip decreased your likelihood of hitting a home run. But I want to see guys do bat flips. So I want to see less dingers throughout the year because I want to see bat flips. How stupid is that? I want to see more home runs. I don't care if they can't flip the bat or showboat as they run around the bases. I want to see more home runs. I want to see more fish catching, and I want to see bigger bags caught than the year before. And the only way that that's possible anymore is with forward-facing sonar.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Which that leads on to going into the third invitational of the year. you're pretty down about shallow fishing. We go into Eufaula. Huge, I guess not huge, small population of big fish.
Yeah.
It's a huge lake that has a small population, kind of condensed into
And an
the
insane amount of dead
end.
water. Yeah.
Insane amount of dead water. You really have to stay on the lower end of the lake unless you just know that there's, one place that has fish in it. But going into this practice, we're still riding that low from Clark's Hill.
I'm riding that low.
Yeah. You're riding
you
that low
had Clark's Hill, followed by Grand Lake going into Eufaula, followed by, was Dardanelle after Eufaula? No, it was before. It was before Eufaula because we went straight from Eufaula to Kentucky Lake.
I'm not sure.
I think you fished Dardanelle before Eufaula.
April 4th,
it was a week or two.
April 4th through the 6th. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So you're riding Clark's Hill, Grand, and Dardanelle. So I am riding the Misery Train. Cole is now off of a top 25 and 2 top 10s in Toyotas. So man's loving life. I'm here at Lake Eufaula in absolute misery because I am now coming off of 2 of the worst finishes in my tournament career, and I show up and have the first 2 days of practice are just absolutely miserable. Like when I say it's miserable, like a fish a day.
A fish a day. Like maybe keepers?
Yeah, like, well, no, the first day I caught like an almost 3 on a bull shad, and the second day I caught 3.5 on a bull shad.
Oh, I remember that. Like little pieces of wood in the back of pockets.
Yeah. Like if you can find a piece of wood in the water, you catch 2.5 to 3.5 pounder off it.
But there's like 5 in the whole lake.
In the first day of practice, Cole pulls up and catches 17 pounds with a 5-pound smallmouth, just dragging a tube down the bank on stuff that looks like everything else.
Well, it was like a little, honestly, it looked like a little rock ledge. It was like a little seam that came out on a gravel bank. And I was like, dude, I caught that fish, and I was like, it's about to be on. And then the next day, I find this rock pile actually on Google Earth, and it's got, these couple big boulders on it. And I throw up there, and I like reel my line tight, and one just absolutely smokes it. And I wasn't setting the hook at this point anymore, but it was just pure instinct. I was not paying attention, so I whacked this one. I set the hook and ended up being like a 6.5 pounder or 6. I can't remember how big it was. So I don't know. I was feeling pretty good after the first 2 days of practice. But then, what'd you figure out on day 3? Because it turned around pretty quick. The last day of practice, so in the afternoon, I'm like, screw it. I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this shallow fishing garbage. I'm done with this whole, let's fish what feels right trash. I'm like, I'm just going to spend the last 5 hours practice staring at my screen. Pull up in a place down lake that has the right watercolor for what I'm trying to do. So it was one of the few places where it was even possible. And I pull up on the first secondary point that I want to look at, and I drop it. I'm scanning. Carp. Was this like a steeper bank or like flatter gravel or?
Yeah, this is like 45-degree angle. Yeah. So it wasn't steep and it wasn't flat.
A little chunkier though.
Yeah, chunky stuff. I pull up on it. I'm scanning. Carp, catfish, and then I see one. I'm like, I don't think that's catfish. I pitch my worm out there. Drops down. Same stuff I was doing in that tournament. Drops down its face. Tunk. I went, please don't be a drum. Please don't be a drum. Ooh. It was a 3.5 pounder. And I was like, this is pretty awesome. Pull up on the second. It was a main lake point, second place to pull up on. And it's somewhere that I had fished previous in practice that looked good that I just didn't catch any. I threw a crankbait over it or whatever, didn't catch any there. I was like, it looks too right to not have one. Pull up, look across it. There's a big dot on like 3 or 4 isolated rocks. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like 5-6 feet deep. Pitch my worm up there. Boom. 4.5 pounder. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, this is cool. So I take the hook out.
I think you called me at this point.
Immediately.
And you're like, dude, you'd never guess what just happened. I just figured him out. I'm on him now.
Yeah, and so me and Cole proceed to run this for like the last 4 or 5 hours of practice. And both of us like got just an exorbitant amount of bites on. I was just throwing that same 7-inch worm that I threw in the tournament, and I put it on a screw lock, and I bet I shook off like 20 in the last 3-4 hours of practice. And so I went from just like down and out to I was catching, I was getting a lot of bites from, and these fish should not have been pre-spawned. Like the water was high 60s, and they've still not spawned yet because the water's so low. And
and it had just come down too. It
yeah,
was up a little bit and had come down. So that's
gotcha.
probably the main
And
factor.
and these fish are still like super pale pre-spawners that are
Yeah.
big, but they're shallow. They're like 2 to 6 feet. And I can go down a stretch and shine down it in carp, catfish, drum, catfish, carp, and then you see one that's swimming just right, and you pitch in front of it. And I mean, it wasn't like I couldn't tell every single time, but I probably weeded out 80% of the carp and catfish and drum and pitched it the other 20% just to make sure they weren't bass, because sometimes the bass will swim with the others. But ended up getting on that deal. And then the first day I go out, I'm like, all right, here's the goal. I want to catch like 15, 16 pounds. I think I can do that with what I'm on. Pull up on my first stretch, don't catch anything. Second stretch, don't catch anything. Third stretch, I pull up right where I had caught a 3.5 pounder in practice. First one I caught on this deal. And I pull up on it, and I see a fish right where that fish was. And I'm like, that's a bass. Pitch my worm up there, drops down to it, tunk, zzz. I get it like all the way up to the trolling motor, it comes off. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Did you see it?
I'm like, really? Yeah, I saw it flash, and then it comes off. And I'm like, are you serious? And so I back up, re-rig my worm, and I'm like, while I'm doing this, I'm staying on the fish, whatever, watching her swim around. Re-rig my worm, pitch it out in front of her. She falls into the bottom, donk, zzz. And this time I got her, and it was a 3.9 to start the day. And I was like, okay, I've got a good one in the box. Let's get to going. Run down to the last creek for the dam, pull in on one of those pea gravel stretches, and I had a pea gravel stretch that had like a couple big rocks on it. And I only saw one there in practice, but I pull up on it. I actually pull up further down on it because there was somebody fishing the higher end of the stretch, so I pulled up about 400 yards away from them, drop trolling motor, and I see one little stick. I'm talking this stick is like this tall and maybe this wide, and it's just single stick, and I see a big dot behind it. I'm like, no way. Pitch my worm up there, and this dot just slithers straight up, catches it, 4-2. And so the first two I catch are a 3.9 to 4.2. I'm like, this is awesome. And so I run up to another creek after catching that one. I actually caught a keeper spot, and then so I had 3 in the box, and then I run up to another creek, pull up on one stretch where I shook off a big one, right where I shook off the big one in practice. Pull up, throw out there. I see her follow it down, dunk, 410. Go around the corner. Another stretch looks just like it. I'm fishing toward Cal Lane. We're just talking. Me and Cal are talking. See a big one come swimming off a rock. Pitch my worm up there, follows it down, dunk, 4.5. So at this point,
Oh
I'm
my
at like
gosh, dude.
18 and change. And so I'm like, this is ridiculous. My smallest fish was like a high 2. And so I'm like, okay, I need to. And so I pumped the brakes. And I was like, I'm not sticking any more of these fish. This is Eufaula, Oklahoma, where if I stick one more fish, that is one less fish I'm going to catch the next day. And I don't know that I can play risky bets with 1 or 2 fish on that place.
Mm-hmm.
So I can just pull up in the first pocket I see. I'm like, let's start practicing. Pull up in this pocket. I'm going between docks, whatever. Pull up, and I see 2 fish or 2 things like swimming a foot under the surface in 2 feet of water. And like I can see a dirt cloud. And it looks like the way they're swimming and the way they're acting, the way they're throwing dirt around, I'm like, these are turtles. I'm like, this is 2 spawning turtles. And I'm like, but you know what? Just for the sake of pitching, I pitch my worm up there. And as soon as it hits the water, one spooks and the other one just goes straight down to it. I'm like, might be a turtle. I don't know. I've never had a turtle bite it off the bottom. It goes tunk. And it was like 2 feet of water. So I go zzz, and the first thing it does is jump. And it was a 4.11.
Oh
And
my gosh.
ended up calling my high 2. So at that point, I think I had 1912 the first day. That was my whole bag for the first day.
So most of the top 10, or a lot of guys that caught them, actually caught them sight fishing, especially days 1 and 2. So, I mean, that's pretty shallow for a fish to be in 1.5 foot or 2 foot of water. But
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of these fish were. Like, in the water being low, help those guys see these fish. So, I mean, everything you're catching was pretty shallow.
Yeah. Everything I caught that week was 6 feet or shallower.
Right.
And then day 2, I go out, and the story of the back half of this tournament is just wind. That is the entire
100%.
story of day 2 and day 3.
Yeah.
And so day 2, I go out, and by 9 a.m. it's like howling. And when we take off, it's already windy. Like it's rolling probably 2-footers down where I was, because it was blowing out of the northwest, and everything I was fishing was on the south side on the main lake, and a lot of the fish I caught on day one were on the main lake. So I tried to fish my main lake stuff for 2 hours, did not get a single bite out there, and then I like, screw it, I'm gonna pull in here. I found a place that I thought was a limit hole, and pull in there, and I catch a high 2, a 3, and then a couple like 15 inchers quick, and then I catch like a 4.5. And so I'm like, all right, we're back on track. I've got like 12 and change, and then I kind of stalled out for a while. Went back to trying to fight the wind and fight the main lake, and it just did not work. And eventually I bailed on it, and I said, I'm gonna put myself out of the wind in the general vicinity of where I'd been catching all these fish, knowing that even if it didn't set up the way I wanted it set up, it's the triangle scenario where if you're around a high population of fish, which for that lake, that was a population center. If you're around a population center, you don't have to be on the best stuff. You just got to be in that area. And so I pull out of the wind, and I'm just throwing. So fun fact for you guys. This was one of 4 fish that I caught all year from Okeechobee to Clarks Hill to Eufaula, Ozarks, Potomac, Mississippi River. This was one of 4 fish that I did not see on live scope before I caught. And
One of 4 fish.
I pull up on this stretch, this pea gravel do nothing stretch, and I'm looking. But while I'm looking, I'm throwing just to keep a line wet, and I pitch it up by this walkway, and it just goes swimming off. 3.5. So now I'm at like low 14s, and I'm like, that's competitive. That'll keep me in the top 10 going into day 3. And ran around a little bit more. Went to the back of the first creek, my limit hole area. I was like, I'm going to go to the back, even though it's not what I want to fish. And I go back there, see one, 210, catch it. So now I've got, all 2.5 pluses. And so I came in with like high 14s after day 2.
14, 12.
Yeah. And then so I come in with that. And at that point, I stayed 5th or 6th going into day 3.
Yep.
And so, on the bubble for whether I was going to get to keep camera all day. And day 3 was my roughest start all week. I went out. My main lake stuff wasn't firing. My limit hole wasn't happening. And, it was too windy to fish the main lake for the most part. But it was just down enough that some of the stuff that I couldn't fish on day 2, I could fish in the morning on day 3. And so I was like, I'm going to rush to my stuff and try and fish it the best I can. And I had 2 stretches that were at the mouth of a creek that I caught big ones on day 1 that I couldn't fish on day 2 because it was too windy. And I pulled up on it. And the first one I pull up on in that area, I catch a 4.6 or 4.7. And I'm like, that's awesome. I got
pretty
a 4+,
one, yeah.
which, yeah. Pull up on the second stretch, which is just adjacent to that. Fish down it. One slides off a rock just like one the first day. And I pitch my worm in front of it. 3.5. And so I started off the day with 2 good ones, like an almost 3.5 and then an almost 4.5. And I hit a drought bad. I caught like a high 1 on one of the stretches back there that I fished on day 1, caught a couple dinks on. And it just hit a wall. And I hit the wall for about 2.5, 3 hours. Only caught shorts, catfish, drum, you name it. And it was looking pretty down. And I was like, you know what? We're going to try the whole triangulation principle in this area. I was like, I'm going to pull up on a stretch that I've not pulled up on that's near what I want to fish. And I'm like, this looks like a stupid stretch. Let's pull up on it. First fish I see. So here's my screen. I see this little bitty dot just swimming at like 4 or 5 feet under the surface in 12 feet of water. And then I just see this massive dot slither off the edge of this rock vein and come up at this little dot and just start following it slowly, like 4 feet below the surface. I'm like, that's a bass. There's no way that's not a bass. And it was coming at a pretty decent pace toward the boat. So I was like, I need to make a good pitch. And I dome pieced it. I hit it like 25 feet out. It was 35 feet away from the boat coming at me. And it gets down to about 3 feet, and this fish just goes. And like it was one of those fast jolts where you don't even feel for the bite. Like you just flip the bail and go. And after 3 hours of no bites, I flipped the bail, zinger, and immediately jumps, and it was a 4.11. And so I've got 4, and I keep going down this do nothing stretch. There's a little bitty brush pile. Pitch my drop shot out there, catching almost 2. So now I've got 5. I've got like 16 pounds because I got 2 big ones, a decent one, and 2 dinks. And so at this point, I'm like, all right, how how on earth in the last hour of the day am I going to get these 2 dinks gone? And I remembered, about a mile away from there, I had one that I saw on the first day that I never got to bite that looked like it was a group of 2 again, just like that other group. And even though
Like it was a
I couldn't
spawning
get them,
fish or something.
yeah, they were like 4 or 5 feet deep, and I couldn't get them to react right, but they were in like this little nook behind 2 docks, and I was like, I bet they're still going to be there. And I'm pretty sure those are bass, but they didn't act right the first day. And so I come there on day 3. Yep, sure enough, these 2 fish are just swimming around the back of this pocket. And so I see them and pitch my worm up there, and both of them immediately goes nose down. I'm like, those are like 2.5, 3 pounders. Flip the bell, hit it, immediately jumps, almost wraps up the trolling motor, 411 again.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so at this point, I've got like 18 and change. And I'm like, this, I have totally 180 my day. I've gone from, looking like I was going to fall to probably 10th to 15th to now I'm going to finish at least in the top 4 or 5. And so I'm running down the lake. I'm like, you know what? This stretch is one that looks right, that I didn't really fish well in practice. Pull up on it, and there's like 25 keepers on it. Now, they're all dinks. So I just start burning worms. Like every cast, 14-incher, 15-incher, 14-incher, 16-incher.
14-inch
And then
limit too.
Yeah, 14 inches limit. And I catch a couple 12-inchers, and I'm about to leave. And I see one dot that looks like slightly bigger than the rest of these dots on this stupid-looking sand point. And I throw my worm at it, hop it, don't, and it was a 2 3/4. Ended up getting a high 1 gallon, cold by a pound. So it took me from whatever I had to, I think I had like 19-13 on the last day of that tournament, and rallied. And man, if it weren't for Kelly having a magical day, that I got really close in that one. But that was
extremely close. Came in second. That was your best finish of the season, and he barely got you because he had like a magical day, and then he topped it off with a magical like last minute stop that really did it. So it was just that would be like you catching another 4.5 pounder to end the day.
And that wouldn't have even won it at that point. I needed for one fish to do it. I would have needed a 5.5 pounder. And I didn't catch a single one over 5 all week at Eufaula. But, Eufaula was a turning point, not just for my season, but for my intellectual bass fishing decision making, which is that you can do it on forward-facing sonar. If you are bullheaded enough, you can do it everywhere. And so I went into the next event. Me and Cole packed up, went straight to Kentucky Lake.
Well, and there's something that is important because Drew probably can tell the difference of a bass to anything else more than anybody else. I mean, you have to be in the top 3 of people who can identify fish on LiveScope because, like you saying that you follow, like there was a ton of carp, ton of drum, ton of catfish, and those fish typically swim a lot more than bass. Like bass are going to be more lazy; they're like moving slower. And
when bass swim, their tail movements stay steady. Like it's not like they go burst, 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 glide, burst, 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 glide. That
like
drum will do that, carp will do that.
Yeah,
catfish are generally the hardest to tell.
Right, but I mean, this right here was definitely, I would say, the defining moment, like you said, for identifying fish in shallow water, and not that wasn't a part of your game because I know that you're always going to be looking at LiveScope, understanding those fish. But I mean, we had a shallow schedule this year. Everywhere we went, besides Clark's Hill, was a deep reservoir with a spawning fish population, so they were up there. So we had a shallow water, river, dirty lake schedule, and you had those first 2 events, and you turned your season around to where you had 3 out of 4 top 10s, and then you made a check in the 4th one. So, dude, from here on out was just insane. You had a phenomenal season, and next tournament was Lake of the Ozarks, in which you got 4th, but you just did the same thing pretty much, right?
Similar. I did the same thing we did at Kentucky Lake, which was instead of fishing for like shallow cruising around pre-spawners, we, at Kentucky Lake, me and Cole both had a top 15.
Right. Yeah, that was the next event. Yeah.
And we went straight from Eufaula to Kentucky, so it wasn't like there was any downtime. We just packed up and drove. And that was where you take the transition from pre-spawn to spawn, and so a lot of the fish were spawning and a lot of the fish were post-spawn at the same time. And so that one I kind of was like, all right, I'm just gonna scope, and I did that.
And you
had a good tournament
won.
that week.
You won the mainly largemouth tournament.
I won the largemouth derby.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, largemouth was the losing battle that week. First and second both, blew me out of the water by catching smallmouth. But that's one for the memory bank for sure. For potentially next year. Hoping the rumors are correct on that one. But
So hold on, you had a key catch, maybe not a key. Well, it was a key catch, but you caught a giant at Kentucky Lake,
I did.
and
Caught a 6
it
pounder.
was eerily similar to all the fish that you caught at Lake Eufaula.
It was. It was. I pulled up on a round point with Chunk Rock, 45-degree angle bank, and I see one cruising down it. And mind you, if you've ever been to Kentucky Lake, especially modern Kentucky Lake, you know that ultimately just seeing a big profiled fish cruising down a bank is rarely enough reason to throw at it. But for whatever reason, I go, you know what? Maybe this one's a bass. I even verbalized it to my co. I was like, just be a bass. And I pitch my worm out there, drops down to it, gets in there about 7 feet. And this fish, like, it does what drum do. It doesn't like bass, they perk up their sharp movements. It does what drum do. It kind of like turn up slow and then kind of turn. And I see it get closer to it slowly. And then, like, I'm expecting to pick up and feel nothing. And I pick up and my line just starts going away from me. And I went, zzz, and this was a 23-inch fish that weighed 514.
Which is a horribly
massive.
skinny fish.
I caught that fish and I was like, this is 7-pounder. Like, this is
Yeah.
a massive, massive fish. And it didn't even make 6, but it was the biggest frame, one of the biggest frame fish I've ever caught out of Kentucky. And it was the same thing as Eufaula. But the rest of the fish I caught that week were
Was
either
that a wacky or a
small.
Nico? Or what were
That
you
was a
throwing?
Nico fish.
Yeah.
That was a Nico fish. But a lot of the fish I caught at Kentucky were wacky fish. Fishing for spawners and post spawners. There's not much better than a wacky worm a lot of times.
No, not when they're that shallow.
And then we turned around and did the same thing in Ozarks.
Yeah. Basically, you were just picking off spawner and post spawner, maybe a couple of pre spawners. I don't know. They're kind of in that range where they were all three. But yeah, just fishing little pieces of cover. And you come in 4th place. You caught 19, 18, and then you had boat troubles the last day, and still had 16 pounds.
Sucked, but ultimately, I got to fish for all the fish the last day that I wanted to fish for. So as much as the boat trouble sucked, ultimately I got to fish for the ones I wanted to fish for. So barring finding one or two really big ones that I hadn't already found, which was unlikely because of how much time we both spent looking that week, barring some sort of miracle, I still wasn't going to win that event even with a working boat. But it would have been nice to have had all that fishing time for sure.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to beat Keith Carson and John Cox
and John
trading blows with 4 and 5 pounders the last day. Yeah, it was just crazy to watch those guys catch those freaking. I mean, dude, Keith Carson the last day caught like a 5.5 pounder, and watching on a bed, it was like it didn't even look that big, really. It was like, that's a 3, that's a 3.5, might be a 4. I mean, it's. Then he sets a hook on it. And it's like, 4 pounder maybe, and then he gets it next to the boat, and it's like, holy cow, that's a big fish.
Yeah. One of my favorites was watching your 6-pounder from Clark's Hill. That was such an awesome fish catch. I mean, because you got so much going on in the boat. The fish is absolutely losing its mind. And it's on a big rod with a big line and a big single hook. So, like, everything happens. Nothing happens in slow motion with that technique.
No. Flipping, you just get into the boat. And yeah. Dude, that was very much a highlight of my season. And how often do you get to catch the big fish of a day in a tournament that big?
Get it filmed.
Yeah, and have a camera in the boat. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? I don't know, but it's pretty awesome.
And that is where we get into my disparity of why I feel like I put myself in the situation to have a chance to win a good amount, but it never happens, and it's because rarely ever. So in terms of catching giant fish, the number of times I have weighed a fish over 5 pounds in a major tournament is when I say major tournament, I'm talking Toyotas and Invitationals, not college tournaments. I have weighed a fish over 5, I think, 4 times. 4 times. In any Toyota or Invitational, I've weighed one over 5 4 times. Even, in multiple 19-pound bags at Gunnersville, couple 19-pound bags at Eufaula, 19-pound bag at Ozarks, high 18 at Ozarks. I've caught only 4 over 5 pounds in 14 tournaments. And you look at that stat, and that is probably on the bottom 25% of most of the field in terms of tournaments to 5-pounders.
Well, and especially guys that have your amount of checks and amount of top, 25 to 40th finishes, because typically that's what propels those guys to be up in the top 25. But what propels you is catching a solid 2 3/4, 3 1/4 pound fish,
3-pounders.
Yeah,
a lot of 3 to 4s. So this year, so for reference, we talk about this season. I've caught over 5. I have caught 3 fish over 5 this year. I've caught an almost 6 at Kentucky. I caught a 6 1/4 at the St. Lawrence River, and I caught a 7 1/2 at Grand Lake. And every other tournament that I've fished this year, so I've caught those 3 this year over 5. But over 4, I've caught I'm talking probably at least 22 to 25 this year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Over 4.
That's a lot of 4-pounders.
But only 3 5-pounders, which means that there's something in the way that I fish that doesn't lend to catching giants very often. And when I have caught giants, I've caught a couple giants in smallmouth tournaments. But here's the thing. It's smallmouth fishing. Smallmouth eat finesse techniques, regardless of how big they are. I got a 6'4" on a Demi Kirigan 5-pound line. And then the almost 6 I caught at Kentucky was when they're spawning, which is when, big largemouth typically tend to eat a smaller presentation more often, which is around the spawn,
And it's when those bigger fish are up there around the populations of fish more often.
Yeah, 100%. And the other 2 that I've caught the last 2 years over 5 in a major tournament have both been 7+ pounders, and they've both been on an Alabama rig.
Yeah, which is like a different animal, though. I mean, that's the best big fish catching rig of all time.
100% when you have the conditions for it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I had a 7.5 last year at Lake of the Ozarks in the Toyota there on an A rig.
Also on an A rig.
But I think a lot of it's technique, but I mean, I throw a jerk bait a good amount, and I throw a swim bait.
Well, I mean, out of those 3 big ones, 3 biggest fish that you've caught in a tournament this year, 2 out of 3 were on a spinning rod and finesse presentations. Which smallmouth, I mean, we'll equate that to a bait caster for a largemouth tournament. I mean, that doesn't count just as a, I'm fishing power versus finesse.
Yeah.
And
but you tend to catch way more big ones. I mean, how many have you weighed this year over 5?
So this year at Grand, I weighed almost 7 and a 5 the first day, 2 5s on day 2. Clarks Hill, I caught the almost 7, so that's 5. At Dardanelle, I caught 3. So I think I'm an 8, and every single one of those was on a bait caster.
8 of them to my 3.
8 out of 8 were not fishing a finesse technique, which I do a majority of the time. But all of those fish except for one, I believe, which was the one at Clarks Hill, because I was just flipping a channel swing. All of those I was either flipping a jig or throwing a square bill or jerk bait to a piece of cover. It was all like I saw the fish, threw to him. Like at Dardanelle, I caught 3 5-pounders, and 2 were on a square bill and 1 was on a jig. And it was just directly throwing to the fish, the same way that we finesse fish, but just happened to be, bigger ones. And I don't know that a drop shot wouldn't have caught those same fish, though. That's the hard thing to say, because you're still throwing to that fish either way. You can't throw 2 baits
at the same time.
Exactly. So,
and your first cast is always your most valuable. But that's why you have big boy trophies and I don't, is because you have been consistently way better at deciding when to apply power techniques than I am. I just kind of lean on the spinning rod 24/7.
Here's the problem, though. Not the problem, but how me and you fish and practice very similar, and we share information, and it's never like, hey, this spot has them, but it's area breakdown or pools breakdown, or it is how these fish are doing whatever, how they're relating, or what they're going
how
to
they're what kind of cover they're relating to, how they're relating to it. Is it up current, is it down current?
Right,
what the water temperature is, what the color is, all the aspects that make a bass live on a certain thing.
Yeah,
other than saying, hey, this is the creek I'm fishing and this is the point I'm on.
Right. Everything that makes the bass be there is what we try to figure out. And so we typically figure out a fishery rather than just find the fish. And so what me and you do in practice is we find as many 3-pounders as we can. And so typically that equates to making checks. And let's see, between the both of us, we fished, I don't know, six Toyotas, 7 Toyotas.
Last year?
No, this year. I fished 3, you fished 4.
Oh, you mean between the two? Yeah.
Yeah, between the two of us. Yeah. And I mean, we've lots, mainly top 10s and in the teens. Like we're just catching fish.
Yeah.
And so what that does is it those bigger fish typically don't hang out around the population of smaller fish. So like for me, for example, in college, the first 2 years, whenever I had less experience, my partner Cameron and I won some college tournaments. And then when we won our last one in 2021 on Grand, and it was with no big fish, by the way. It was just being consistent with like 13.5-pound bags.
Without big fish.
Yeah, it was just extremely tough. But from that point on, I started to learn how to find fish consistently, which drastically changed my tournament results. And it wasn't like first or second or 50th anymore. It was more consistently 10th to 30th. And it's really hard to break that barrier to get to the top 5 whenever you're not catching those bigger fish. But those bigger fish typically aren't doing what the bigger population are doing.
Yeah, and here's the thing, is despite our system, I would say statistically, with the amount of money that we've made combined the last, year since we started doing this at Truman, I'd say it works. It works extremely well. Because you can 100%. Corner an entire fishery in 2 or 3 days to a couple areas of the lake that are right, and corner what the best deal is to be doing. But here's where it diverges, is that me and you oftentimes end up doing a similar deal in similar areas, but I never end up fishing around you. And here's the other thing, is what you do in practice, oftentimes, what you end up catching a lot of your fish on, you hone the bait a little bit more in practice than I do. So I have such a supreme confidence in throwing a spinning rod that, like in practice, I'll have a bait cast rod in my hand most of the time. But by the time the tournament comes around, my boat 180s. Is in practice, a lot of times I've got a bait cast rod in my hand, and in the tournament, oftentimes I've got just spinning rods or almost just spinning rods. Whereas you kind of hone the technique just as much as you do the areas, which I think lends to consistently catching more big fish, because the very few opportunities you do get at giant ones, you catch them because you've got everything dialed. Whereas when I show up and I've got most things dialed, but not everything dialed, I think, it lends to a little bit of increased flexibility, but what it doesn't lend to is maximizing very few opportunities at giant fish, because you already have everything dialed going into it.
Well, I think that based off that argument, your style is better for consistency and making money, really, and being able to change with the conditions and make more top 10s. Because when are we not faced with changing conditions in tournaments, whether it's rising, falling water, changing temperatures, fish coming in or out of a spawn?
It's probably got to be pretty close to 50-50, maybe 60-40. 60 change, 40 no change. Yeah, I mean, it changes. It changes often, but there's a lot of times where it doesn't change. Eufaula, we were given wind, but Okeechobee and Clark's Hill, steady conditions. Ozarks, steady conditions. Potomac River, steady conditions. Mississippi River, steady conditions.
Right, but those fish can still move on steady conditions.
Yeah, they can.
But like we were saying before, we typically find the population of fish, and so we're still going to be around them no matter if they've moved a little bit or not. There's still enough fish around.
And that is the biggest, I think the biggest fact, me and you have talked about this a lot, but for the sake of saying this on air, the biggest deciding factor in what makes what I do and what you do different, even though we're doing very similar things often, is that you trust bass and I don't trust them worth a crap. Which means whenever things are going according to plan or predictably, you are always going to be a notch above where I'm at because you fish more aggressively. You take what we do and you trust them to act the way you want them to act. But I don't trust them whatsoever, which I think, does lend to the part where you said, the consistency aspect of it, which is, I think, probably a poor term for this because you're, the most impressive thing about what you do is you're extremely consistent at it. But even so, consistently, I'm going to put a lot of quality bites in the boat. But ultimately, whenever you don't trust bass, generally speaking, you kind of get locked into areas a lot more often. You don't do a whole lot of running around, and you're not going to do the things that are necessary to win. Because when you don't trust them, you're going to turn into a vulture. And what you're going to do is you're going to scavenge everything that you can possibly find and catch everything in front of you. And how often is what's in front of you what wins a tournament? Not often. Not often.
Yeah, because it's typically to win a tournament, it's something very specific or like certain stretches or, it's not just I'm fishing a little bit of here, a little bit of there, the same as everyone else. So
Yes.
I agree on that. But the problem with the way I fish this year is, so I typically have I don't know, between 10 and 12 rods on the deck. And no matter what it is, even if I know I'm going to fish with 3 of them. And I think my problem was trying to fish too aggressively instead of catching what I just could have caught. Because I made 2 checks out of 6 in the Invitationals. And
it's really uncharacteristic for the way that you fish.
Which is not very good. And exactly. I usually just do that and catch the fish that are there. But I also think that catching more bigger fish this year has put confidence in that aggressiveness to try to catch more of them. And so, yeah, I think that was trying to be aggressive. I think is what made my season what it was.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think another big motivating factor to your aggressiveness and mine that I was going to indulge in at lacrosse that I didn't end up doing because of barge traffic situations is the field that we're fishing against. The weights are consistently so high that you feel the need to fish in an aggressive manner.
Oh, exactly.
Because you want to get ahead of the curve. Because if you find yourself in our field trying to consistently try to catch 14, we see it from a viewer's perspective. When we got 14 pounds, that sucks. Because we're watching the BPT or the elites or watching whatever, any of these tours, and we're watching them fish these dynamite fisheries and going 14 pounds is garbage. And then you get out there and you realize, man, not only do I have to, a lot of these times, not only do I have to catch 14 or 15 once, I got to do it 2 days in a row just to make the top third of the field.
Right. Or even looking at the results, typically, you see the top 50 and you're like, oh, that dude got 50th place. He kind of sucks a little bit. But that's not the case when you're fishing against this level of competition. Like, it is hard to make it in that top 50 because of how consistently these guys catch them. I mean, you can't do what you do in college and catch 12 and a half, 13 pounds and do consistently well. You survive. You make championships. You cannot do that when you're fishing at this level. These guys are too good.
Yeah. 100%. And the thing is, it invites you to do reckless, aggressive decision making because it feels so good when you can get ahead of the curve in one of those, because you feel way safer when you're not around that bubble. Because if you can go out, say you go out at Eufaula and you go bust 18 or 19 pounds the first day, you feel way better on that joint catching a big bag one day than trying to catch 14 and a half pounds twice. Because doing that twice there is really difficult because you don't even know if you're going to catch 5 that day.
Right.
Or
you have 13 and then man, now I have to catch 15 and a half.
You gotta slightly improve it. And it's so inviting to go out and fish aggressively because it's what you have to do to ever feel ahead of the curve. And ultimately, my saving grace in a couple of these. So in the Potomac River and Eufaula, my saving grace was I only had one deal. So I knew, I was going to do that deal and I wasn't going to make any adjustments. I was going to do it until success or failure. And it ended up working at Eufaula, and it worked the first day at Potomac. And then Ozarks was one where it kind of, after the warm up we had at Kentucky Lake, really just kind of felt natural. Went out, had a very aggressive practice, and found a lot of fish. And that was one where it wasn't in that middle ground you don't want to be in. It wasn't in that, I found a lot of stuff, but not enough. You either want to be in, I found one or two places, but they're really good, or that I found just an exorbitant amount of stuff that I can fish however I want throughout the day and feel comfortable that if I need to pull the plug and go catch a good one, I can pull the plug and go catch a good one. Ozarks was one of those. And Mississippi River was a bit of both. That's a tournament. I want to hear you talk about that tournament a little bit, because my situation was, I was trying to decide between whether I was going to go up to 7 or down to 9 first day of the tournament, and barges made it where I didn't feel comfortable going to 7, so I made the layup decision, or what I thought was the layup decision, to keep myself in it and not risk it. But you approached it a little bit differently.
Yeah, which your decision ended up getting you 9th place and was not a layup decision.
No, but at the moment I didn't know that.
No, but I mean, it ended up pretty well for you. So I went up to 7, and I got to fish every day, not near as much as I wanted to. We had barge troubles every single morning. Where day 1, we took off at 6:30. Day 1, I didn't start fishing till 9:30. Day 2, we were lucky and the barge was going through as we took off. So I got up there an hour late, so like 7:30. And then the last day I got there like 9:45. So pretty much cut out 2 days of the tournament, my first 3 hours of getting to fish.
Which was it's the biggest time of day on the Mississippi River by far.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a time whenever those fish are schooling and feeding, and it's, yeah, like you said, it's just good. So the problem is pool 8, it kind of sucks. I know that tournaments are consistently won. There's lots of checks cut, whatever.
Blah,
it's a really big pool. Okay, yeah, there's a population of fish, but I have fished that pool every time that I've been there, which has been 3 times now, and I can never catch hardly anything of any size, anything that I would want to say, hey, I might have a good tournament if I go do this. That never happens.
The biggest bag I've ever caught in 8 was 13 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Like it just, right. And, but consistently, I have always seen the size in pool 7. 2 years ago, we had a college tournament, and me and Cameron came in 10th place, and I lost like a 4.25 pounder, a couple 3s, and those would have all been the biggest fish that we had, and we lost all of them. Still got 10th place. So it's like, dang, there's a good population of like good largemouth. And then last year, Hunter Baird, my partner, and we fished up there in that college tournament, and in practice, Hunter caught a 6-pounder. Like, that is a absolute unicorn for the Mississippi River up there.
Absolutely.
Just a giant fish. And then this year, in practice up there, I caught a 4.5-pound smallmouth. There was just a lot of fish activity going on because the water level was lower than normal. And so I fished a little bit, like a half a day and 9, and caught a lot of fish. Like, 12, 13 pounds was like not just super easy, but there was plenty of fish to be able to sit on like wing dams and do that. Yeah. But I was like, man, to be able to like be around size enough to have a chance, I got to fish in pool 7. Even if I only get like 2 or 3 hours, I have to go up there to give myself a chance. And so I waited for the barges every day just to go up there and try to catch some big smallmouth. And I didn't have any like giants. I ended up catching a 3.5 pounder up there. I caught a 4-pound largemouth on a wing dam. But just
unbelievable,
which is crazy, right? A 4-pound largemouth on a wing dam. And then I ended up catching one like 3.5 on a wing dam in a pool 8. But I don't think that I had the right experience to help me fish those wing dams that I had efficiently enough with the time that I was given. So obviously that's where on the last day, top third of the field, there was 11 of us up there, and 1, 2, 3, a couple other guys in the top 10 came from up there. Really fishing the grass flats in Alaska, something that I couldn't figure out in practice, but that just goes to show you, like, it's a small pool, but the size is definitely there. And I know that potential is probably an 8-2, but I don't know. Why do you think that the size is what it is in pool 7?
My theory with 7 is that you have, so with 7, you have more prominent areas of current adjacent to all of the flat stuff. So 8, you have main current, you got a little bit of trickle current mixed in with a lot of really shallow flat areas. You have down in Stoddard, you got a big flat area, and then you in the far backwaters, you got a couple deeper channels. But in 7, you got main channel, deep water current, deep water current, deep water current, deep water current, all the way into Alaska, and then it hits the flat and it stays flat. You don't have inconsistency, which makes it, one, the fish can choose what kind of deal they're wanting to be on at that time really well. They can, they want to be on the main river, or they want to be in the chutes, or they want to be in the backwater on the flat stuff. But you don't have all that stuff mixing together. You have certain sections of that pool that set up a certain way, and the whole section sets up that way. In pool 8, there's so much stuff where it's like deep, and then it just goes to 6 inches of water for 300 yards, and then it goes deep again. And like, it's so inconsistent, and it makes the navigation for those fish so difficult. And I think that's what fosters such a big fish population, is big fish like habitating in certain small areas. Now, they may move throughout the year, but big fish don't like just swimming and swimming and swimming. Big fish like to have areas that they consistently habitate. And in pool 7, that, it really invites that, because if they want to live shallow in the eelgrass, they can go to Alaska. If they want to live in those chutes and those deep holes and in the current, in that sidewash current, they can do that. And if they want to live on the main river, they can do that. But they don't have all of that stuff blending together in these areas, and they're not forced to traverse through areas they don't want to just to get to where they want to go.
Right. And that's just set up with how the river is. I mean, pool 7 is so much smaller than pool 8 or pool 9. Pool 9 is narrow, just mega huge. But and also the population of shad. Like, all week and in practice, I was around huge numbers of shad. All the guys that were fishing out in Lake Alaska. It's just a giant grass flat that has these ditches of sand bottom from the current, making it clean. And they were just concentrated in certain areas where the bait fish were set up. And I know that's a really big thing the later in the year it gets, just like anywhere. They really set up on the bait fish, and they use that current to their advantage. And so I feel like you're saying, that they can school up easier because it isn't a vast area of, like you said, sand flats, sand shoots, or sand drops that actually build up and come all the way up to the surface. But it allows that current to flow through. And so there's so many more current setup areas in pool 7.
Yeah,
I mean, all
that
of
is
pool
true.
7.
It's easier to find current when there's no current in 7.
Right. And there's current just about everywhere in pool 7, even in the backwaters, because of having these little channels, or I call them like canals. They're not very big. They're just cut out ditches that lead out to these areas, but they always concentrate around that. And then, like, in the fall, I've heard that these gizzard shad get on current break type stuff, and these guys catch them on a big spook, on a bull shad, on big shad baits, and they catch big largemouth and big smallmouth. Yeah, an A-rig, they just destroy them. So I actually think that if we went to Mississippi River like later in the year, the weights would be
better.
The weights would be really good. Yeah.
In,
but
like,
still a fun
October.
Week. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was enjoyable, and my experience was a little bit different. It was more of a, you did kind of do what a lot of people are doing, but just find a way to do it better. You did it more high percentage. You did more bait rotating, and you you did it. Essentially, you just tried to time everything right and dot all your T's and cross all your I's. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah, pretty much. And luckily for me, luckily, because I thought there was going to be more guys doing this. But whenever I came out of the lock at pool 7, 95% of the guys took a right and went into
Really?
Lake Onalaska. Yeah, and there was only 3 of us that were fishing the wing dams, which was me, Jordan Hurt, and Paul Elias, who sat on one wing dam all day, so didn't have to worry about him taking up too many
Brutal.
fish. But but yours was a bit different, deciding to go down to 9.
So I went down to 9 with the plan of I had some wing dams found. I had a couple, I had a backwater area with some undercuts that was half decent. And then I had a couple sand drops that I thought were decent. And I had one area that was a big milfoil, or not milfoil, big eelgrass flat that had some fish in it. And I was like, with the whole lock situation at 7 on day 1, I was like, I know I can go down to 9, catch 12 to 14, and stay relevant. And so I went down to 9. Finally, get down there after an hour and a half, and get down there, get to my first place, and I start fishing, and it's not happening. Like, everything I go to is not happening. And so I catch like a high 2, catch a couple 1-somethings off wing dams, and it's just not popping the way it was. And so I'm running around and go to my backwater area, go to my undercuts, right? And undercuts at the Mississippi River are one of the most consistent ways when you find a good area to catch that 12 to 13 pounds over and over and over again. So I pull up to my area that's got the undercuts. I pull in there, and I catch an almost 3 smallmouth. I catch 2.5 pound smallmouth. I catch a couple 2 something largemouth. And so I'm like, it's popping. I get to like 12 pounds by like 10:30. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. I've got a decent start enough to stay relevant. If I was to catch a big bag the second day, but I was like, I need to try and cull out a couple of these 2-pounders. Maybe I was like, I'm going to catch 2 more 3s today. And I ran around. I had a brush pile that I found in the backwater in the Mississippi River, a brush pile. And I pull up on it, and I'm fishing it. And I finally, it's like 10 feet in front of the trolling motor, pitch my drop shot out there, hang it at the top of the pile, and this fish just eases over to my drop shot and just goes, boom. I just feel it, and I go, zzz, and it was a 215 largemouth, so almost 3-pounder. And then, so that I'm like, awesome. I've kind of hodgepodged this up. This is great. And I was at that point, I was at almost 14. And then I pull up on a place that I thought was, so I had a couple eelgrass stretches that I caught some big ones on in practice that just didn't pan out. Those were the only fish that were there. And so I pull up on a place I thought was a limit hole because I thought maybe I could catch a high 2 or something, cull some ounces. And I drop scope and start looking around, and I see this school of bait, right? And there's 2 or 3 just blowing it apart. So I throw my swim bait over, the same one I held up.
How deep is this?
I don't know, 3 feet. And they're just blowing bait apart in 3 feet. Throw my swim bait up there, and right at the trolling motor, it flashes and goes, and it was a 212 largemouth. So I'm like, awesome, now I got like 13 and high 13s and close to right at 14, and that was a good little upgrade. Now I've got a good quality bag, and I start poking around this area, and I catch a couple 2.5 pound smallmouth, and then I see this school like 40 in one school of bait, 35 to 40 bass in 3 or 4 feet of water. And I'm like, this is absolutely nutty. Throw my swim bait out there, and they are just fighting over it. Like, I can see the boils in the water. I mean, there's that many bass fighting over it in that shallow water. And it was like that sand drop deal that Chris Johnson was doing last year in the elite event there. Or like that event that was like 2015, I think, that Alton Jones Jr. was catching on the eelgrass flats, where like there's so many fish you don't even know what to do with. And it's something that until this year I had only ever heard of on the Mississippi River, never seen it. And like the first fish that grabs it, 310 smallmouth, so an almost 3 3/4 smallmouth, and I get to 14, 15. I catch that fish, I make one more cast, and I hook like a 2 3/4 smallmouth, and it jumps off. And I said, I can't do this. I pulled the plug, ran back to the lock, and it's a long run, long lock session. So I put my earbuds in. I'm just chilling. I'm bumping tunes. I'm planning, like, I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna trash them second day. So weigh in. I'm in like 14, 15. I think I'm barely in the top 15 with almost 15 pounds, which is just nutty for the Mississippi River. And then day 2, I go down there, and I get down, second cast, jump off like a 3-pound smallmouth. I'm like, this is just great. And so, winding my swim bait, boom, pull into it, comes off. So I like lose a 3 and one that I thought was probably about 2 3/4 in the first 5 minutes of the day. Then I'm fishing around. Next one I catch is another 310 smallmouth.
This is where you saw the giant school of them the day before.
Yeah. And so there's about 20, 25 left by the time I get back on day 2. And I catch 310, catch a 2.9 or 210, so a medium high 2. So I got 2 I can live with. Catch another 2.2, 2.2. I catch 2-pounder, and it's bleeding. And I'm like, oh no, what do I do? I need one more to get to 5. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna throw it back. I'm not gonna risk it. And then the thunderstorms roll in. And day 2, it got gnarly on us for about 40 minutes, where it was blowing gusts of 40 plus, pouring, lightning, like rod busting every time you put the rod in the air.
It was bad.
It was rough. And I pull up on the bank. I'm waiting it out. I'm not getting struck by lightning over this. I'm like, all I need is a good hour and a half of fishing on this place to catch them. So I waited out. It gets about 9:30 and it starts to pass. Finally get back out there, and the 40 plus mile an hour winds in this depth of water had turned the entire area up, just turned it to sand, just sand everywhere, sand particulate everywhere. Like every fish I saw in scope was like you could see the sand move with their tail. Like that's how much sand was in the water, and it just blew this area out. I caught one more 2 1/4, and I fished there for like 3 hours, and I had nothing left in the tank. But ultimately, I was like, I'm running back. I've got 13 1/4 in the well, and I'm like, it's an okay day, but I'm not really happy with this. But I was like, if that sand settles, those fish didn't just disappear. Like if that sand settles, that they'll reset up on it, and I think I can catch another couple 3-something pounders the next day and catch 13 or 14 again. And at that rate, Marshall had a rough. No, he had a good first day, and then he had kind of a rough second day. And
it's at this point it's you and Marshall for angler or rookie of the year and a Bass Pro
the
Tour
BPT cut.
Yeah. So
it's
this is a crucial decision.
Yeah. And so I'm going into day 3, and Marshall's in like 30 something place, and I'm like, I got to beat him by 21 spots. So I'm like, what's my best? Because I was like, if I can catch like 12.5 or better, I'll stay where I'm at. And I knew that Cole, me and Cole had communicated about what we were doing, what pools we were going to. So I knew a lot of the stuff Cole was fishing up in 7 was some stuff that I was gonna plan on fishing if I went up 7. But after 2 days of getting fished by him and the guys up there, I was like, I don't think that's probably a smart decision. And and Cole was still in great shape. I mean, you were only like 3 or 4 spots behind me.
18th,
after the second day.
Yep.
And so like I was like, he's in position to have a good event. Plus you'd been fishing that stuff for a couple of days. I didn't think with that many days of fishing that pool under your belt that I could catch him any better than you had been. And with what you had been catching, that was what I was aiming to catch at least the last day to make sure, I gave myself a fighting chance.
Yeah, it got tougher every day. So
and so I made the decision to go down to 9 again, and I run down to my starting area, and it's still blown out, like sand everywhere still. I don't even know how, because it was slick, super slick. And I get out there and I fish it for an hour, and I catch like a 112 smallmouth. I'm like, oh my goodness, the wheels are coming off. This is going to be embarrassing. Because like in the Mississippi River, if you catch like 8 pounds last day of the tournament, I don't care how high you are. If there's 50 guys fishing, you're gonna be the last guy. You're gonna drop down to the 40s, bare minimum.
Yeah.
And
100%.
So I was like, this is awesome. The wheels are coming off just like Potomac River. And I'm running down the river trying to make an adjustment, and I see a wing dam pop up, and I'm like, this is the juice. I'm like, this is a shallow wing dam. I didn't know it was there, but it's this is the depth I wanted to be in, which is like 2 to 4 feet. I pull up on it, it's like 6, 7, 8 feet deep. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is way too deep. And I was just spun out, and then I turn my trolling motor like left, and I turn it, and I just see bait just cover the back half of my screen, and I just see them. I mean, brown ones just darting through the bait left and right, probably 25 of them. And I start catching them like cast for cast for probably a good 40 minutes. And I get to like 12 and change, and I've got like a bunch of 2 somethings. and then I catch a 3-4. And I'm like, oh, there's some big ones here. And so I catch that 3-4, make a little bit of a bait change, upsize my head, throw back out there, 3-pounder. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have just single-handedly, and everything was going so smooth. I was like, this might be my day. And I keep fishing, catch some more twos, coal up a little bit more, and then I take one more pass over the epicenter of this wing dam that had like most of the big ones. Every time I threw over it, I saw 10 or 12 chase it out. And I switched my head size again to where I can reel it a little bit faster even still. And I pull up on it, make one more cast over it like with 15 minutes left because we had to be back by 11:30. And I pull up, make one more cast over it, line it, and I see 2 or 3 big ones just arc off the wing dam. And I turned my troll motor just slightly away and lost sight of him, and it just goes and caught another 3-pounder. Had 14 and change, and I mean, absolutely just saved my season from the brink of disaster. And with how magical it felt, I'm running back to the lot going, there might be a chance that I've done this, that I've done what I needed to do to give myself, a real shot at this happening. Everything just went so smooth. I thought maybe it was meant to be that day, and it just wasn't. And but nonetheless, I mean, such a fun event. Caught a ton of fish, and it was really cool to get in on the classic Mississippi River fishing that people always talk about, where you're covered in fish and it's just about how fast you can catch them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really enjoyable. Pool 9, I give it like an 8 out of 10 stars. And the only 2 that's lacking are just for size.
Yeah, but the population in Pool 8 is just amazing, and out of the guys that go down there, it typically turns out pretty well because there's not a lot of guys that make that trip down there.
It's the best pool in the river for catching 13 pounds by far.
Yeah, for sure. By far. For sure. But, I mean, this tournament, 13 pounds a day, got you 26th place.
Yeah, so a good tournament, but not what I needed to do to have a
fighting
chance.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have done much better given that you got 9th place, and this was kind of more up to Marshall kind of winning it for himself because
I put the ball in his court on the last day for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he needed to catch them. He needed to have like a pretty decent day for the Mississippi River.
And then he
did. He had 13 and a half pounds, and he made the BPT and beat you out of Rookie of the Year by like a pound. I mean, that was his weight. If you had caught a pound less, and this is crazy how this amounts
5
to
points.
The whole season, it was 5 places. So, for example, I mean, you got 110th at Clarks Hill. That is a single, 2.5 pounder?
Yeah.
That would have done it. And that's crazy.
I dumped a 4.5 at Clarks Hill and a 4 at Okeechobee and a 3 at Okeechobee. And I don't know how big the other one was at Clarks Hill, but any of those fish. Now, granted, we can't look at it as, lost fish cost me it, because lost fish costs a lot of people a lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, that's the deal, because a lot of those guys a lot of those guys that are up there ahead of you, guarantee they had also lost fish or, on some sort of circumstance that they could have done a little bit better. Everybody typically has that kind of thing.
And, that's another rabbit hole conversation too, is like, how much are when you get to our level and the levels above, how much, when you get to that level of a banner year, is attributed to execution versus just understanding them better than you did the last year? Well, because there have been a lot of banner years in bass fishing made by people landing fish that they shouldn't land, or landing everything in general.
Uh-oh. Lost you, Drew. He's trying to join again. Looked like he bumped his camera. Hey, what's up?
Nice.
You just decided to leave?
Turns out if you get a phone call and you try to swipe it away on this, your day's over. Nice. But yeah, JP called me, so I'm swiping him away. I'm gonna call him back later.
Nice. Well, anyway, that's what we were saying was hard work is something that is I want to say expected, but it's what you have to do.
Standard.
And it's standard, and it comes down to who had that lucky 6-pounder that jumped over a stick and into your boat, or like if you didn't lose like any key fish throughout the season. That doesn't happen very often, but And the biggest thing that I see that separates those like for real top 10 guys from the guys that are 40s, 50s, 60s, still good fishermen, but it's the mindset. It's when they make their changes. It's every little thing about the decisions that they make, which a lot of times is something very minute. It's just a minor detail that they catch on to that makes a huge difference throughout the season. So I think I had this conversation with Keith Carson, very smart dude, but he said that every year he like picks something to learn or something to try to fix about his fishing. And the biggest one that he's done is to bail. Like if something's not working, he bails. And so he fishes the conditions every day. And I think that's something that is really hard to do in fishing because we practice.
It's extremely hard.
We practice for 3 solid days, sun up to sundown, and you like figure something out. You're like, okay, I just need to go find some more of this or whatever. But that's the same deal about any guy on the top level is they practice every day of the tournament. They practice, they figure it out, they find new stuff, and so that's it's like an instinct deal. It's things go your way,
and I think the best bailer in our field, obviously that is a cool approach to doing it, and it's something that's definitely very stylish. I think the best bailer in our field this year consistently had to be Marshall Robinson because he came to the end of his rope after the first day of the tournament, 5 of 6 events. 5 of 6 events, he had poorer first days than second days. And the only second day all year that he had worse than his first was at the Mississippi River, and it was worse by just a moment.
You good? I'm looking at it right here. It was
worse by a pound. That was it.
It was 3 pounds. He went from 14.6 to 11.10.
Shoot, he only got 11 pounds. Anyways.
He only.
That was the only day of 6 tournaments. And like every tournament, you look at my season, every tournament, my day 1 to day 2 progression, my weight went down every day, all season. Now, of the day 3s I made, Eufaula, my weight improved the last day. In Mississippi River, my weight improved the last day. And
both of those, from what you said today, we're finding new fish.
Yes. Yeah, it was making an adjustment, finding new fish.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to do, to make an adjustment, because we have such a wealth of information going into the event from, the days we spent out there that if it didn't work before, why is it going to work now? And oftentimes you got to break free of that mindset. And that's where those guys that fish naturally are so much more advanced, because they can make that adjustment. And that's something I've got to work on, is like, I pride myself to be a good practicer, and I pride myself in being very good at making the most out of what I end up finding. Like my goal is to be the vacuum. I want to catch everything in sight. And but when it really hits the fan and you run out of fish, you got to be good at just feeling it out. And as far as feeling it out goes, that's something with this deal I've never been good at, and it's something I'm really hoping to get better at.
It is 100% one of the hardest things in fishing, because it's uncertain, and everybody's scared of uncertainty no matter what it is. But in fishing, everything's uncertain already. So to throw more uncertainty into the equation is hard to deal with sometimes. So I think that's what it equates to, because like you said, you don't trust bass. You don't trust that they're going to be where you think they're going to be. Yeah. So I mean, you want to hang around where there's fish, and like you said, catch the fish that are there.
That's why I really appreciate fisheries like Champlain or Lake St. Clair or some of the herring lakes, some of the Ozark lakes at times. The situation we got in at Gunnersville in November last year, where you don't have to trust them. You don't have to, because it's so obvious and it's so meticulous about what you do to make them bite, that it's no longer about trusting that they're going to be where you think they're going to be. It's purely about just forcing them into biting. And that's the situations that are my favorite. I love.
Oh, they're fun. Yeah.
Trying to find a way to catch them that nobody else is doing, or find a way to catch them that tricks them better than anything else. Because ultimately, if I know I'm around them, I trust them. But ultimately the biggest part of trust is if you can take out the whole "are they there" aspect, it's so much easier. because you can really lock into what you're doing and force them into it. And those situations I tend to do well in because I can just focus on trying to make them bite rather than running around going, are they here? Are they here? Are they here? Are they here? What's changed? I don't have to worry about what's changed because they're there.
Yep, that's exactly the case. And I think that's what made me slow down, not slow down, but go into the more catching limits, more limits and less bigger bags in college was I found fish and I sat down and caught them. I live scoped them, I looked at them, and you can watch and how they react and figure out how to catch them. And that can hurt sometimes for sure, because there's guys that sometimes base their whole pattern around running new water and catching the active fish. And Odd Defoe is a wonderful example of that. He just constantly covers new water, finds fish that are hungry and biting, and
Yep.
it really works for him because he has the intuition. He's really good at it.
And the most impressive, the thing about being the vacuum, though, is that when you get in a situation like you got in at Fort Gibson last year, when you are the vacuum and you get around the right group of fish, it gets ugly.
Oh, it happens. Yeah. Yeah.
Invincible because you are catching everything in sight, and everything in sight is a big one. I've had that vacuum feeling only a few times in bass fishing. Generally, it happens around the spawn when I'm catching them on scope, or it happened at Gunnersville in November, and it happened at the Harris chain last year, where like you just feel like when you choose to be the vacuum, you choose to be the scalpel rather than the chainsaw, and you finally get around a group of fish that's the right ones, things get ugly in a matter of 30 minutes because you get every big one to bite and you put them in the boat. And things get out of hand in a good way really fast when you're the vacuum, because you take an area that has 4 or 5 big fish, instead of catching one, you catch 3, or you catch 4, or even you might, if you're lucky, catch all of them.
Which in those given examples that you just gave are the most important. Of pre-spawn, they're grouped up going up to spawn. Florida, they're always grouped up. All the big fish live around each other. And then in the fall, those fish live around bait. So when you find a concentration of fish, it's typically a lot of fish. So that's what you want to do, is catch as many of them as you can and cull as much as possible.
Yep. That's anymore with how pressured our fisheries are. If you can find a way to make an intentional effort to catch every single big fish that you come into contact with, and don't go, oh man, he didn't bite, I'll go find another one. If you make an intentional effort on every big one that you can in every situation, in my opinion, you're going to be more consistent than most everyone else, because instead of fishing for a fish that you're not guaranteeing that you're going to find, you are making an intentional effort to make one bite that you know is there.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, which is a interesting conversation that I think a lot of people maybe don't think about it that way, and I know they unintentionally, people do that all the time. They don't want to leave fish when you're sitting there. Like, you can spend way too much time fishing for fish that aren't going to bite. But I think typically from people that I talk to that aren't successful with that, they don't adjust. They don't change enough to catch those fish, which
A lot of it is just reading their behavior.
exactly. And you have to learn and adapt to what they're doing and how they're behaving, into making them behave how you want them to. So that'll be a good conversation for another episode.
Absolutely.
So to round things out, we have a Toyota on Lake of the Ozarks here in about a month, which Drew and I are going to fight for Angler of the Year.
Heck
And
yeah.
then hopefully we'll get our new invitational soon, schedule soon, and we can be excited about that.
It was sent out the very beginning of September last year, so I'm expecting about the same.
Oh, we're close. We're close for sure. I mean, they already have everything set. They're just holding on to the schedule for whatever reason.
Yeah, for whatever. I'm ready for him to drop it so I can start mentally preparing, because that's a big thing. It's just when they get that out, I can get this past year, I can bury it and I can focus on that, because it's really tangible. Once they give you where you're going, it gets really tangible, because you can picture it.
Yeah, and me and you, we're betting on a schedule that fits us better than this year. It's gonna be. We know at least we're going to Sam River and a couple smallmouth fisheries, not rivers, and hopefully, rumor has it, some other lakes that are live scopable reservoirs that we can do some damage on. So we're excited, but hopefully they release it soon, and they will. But yeah, we'll be able to go through that and wrongly estimate on how exactly we think it's going to happen.
And that'll be a talk for another time soon. But whenever they drop that, that's going to be something to look out for, because I'm sure we'll definitely overcomplicate it and extrapolate everything about the schedule. So
100% like normal. So anyway, guys, this is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Please check out all of our episodes. Me and Drew are going to have another one pretty soon, like we said, to go over the schedule and whatnot and get excited about the rest of the year. So thank you guys for watching. Drew, thanks for being on tonight.
Anytime, buddy. I really appreciate it. And, just like you said, thank you everybody for tuning in. As much as we like to talk about this stuff and extrapolate it and talk about the wee little intricacies of it, that's the joy of these sorts of media content formats. Is you can't do this in an Instagram post. You can't do this in a YouTube video. This is the ability to truly delve in. I know I use it in my own usage of listen to podcasts, but it's a chance to truly delve into the mindscape of people that are doing this often and doing this level. And it's a huge benefit both for us and for you guys, for us to just get to talk through all these thoughts, and for you guys just to get a look inside of what goes on in our heads when we talk about these situations. So I really appreciate everybody listening, and it's a great resource for you guys and for us, and looking forward to doing more in the future.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, everybody, like I said, make sure to catch us next time on the Bass Central Fishing Podcast. See you later.